Hello and welcome everyone. We'll wait for everyone to get in. Takes a few seconds. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. Today's webinar is brought to you by MCSC Women's Business Center, serving SLO, Kern, and Monterey counties. This event is being sponsored by the California Women's Business Centers, which is a support network and a resource for small businesses and women's business centers. MCSC offers low and no-cost assistance and training to budding entrepreneurs and small business. We have consultants who are professionals in social media, e-commerce, business plans, licensing, cash flow analysis, and recovery strategies. Our contact information is on the screen, and I will put it in the chat box shortly. I would like to thank Kathleen Minogue, founder and CEO of Crowdfund Better, for presenting today. Crowdfund Better is a consultancy providing crowdfunding education, strategy, training, and support to entrepreneurs. Kathleen is a crowdfunding thought leader and international speaker and contributes to the contributes to international and local access to capital initiatives. She's particularly focused on bringing the crowdfunding opportunity to women, minority, and rural entrepreneurs. She's an expert in her field, and we are delighted she's here for you today. So before we get started, I'd like to cover a few basic housekeeping items. This is an interactive webinar, and your participation is encouraged. You'll be able to ask questions through the chat box, or by, well, actually, you won't be unmuting yourself, so just in the chat box today. Please limit your distractions and mute your phone. And this is being recorded, and the link for the recording will be sent to you once it's processed. So to find out how you found out about this webinar, we would like to launch a 30-second poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. Please take 30 seconds to complete that. All right, thank you. It looks like the newsletter, share the results. Looks like the newsletter is how everybody heard about this. So thank you for doing that. And now without further ado, I would like to hand you over to Kathleen.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for everyone who is joining us live today and those who will be listening via recording. Thank you to MCSC and the California Women's Business Center for sponsoring this opportunity to talk to you about crowdfunding. As Barbara mentioned, I've been doing this for a few days, actually 8 years. And I am so excited. I was telling Barbara, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to talk to people about crowdfunding and introduce you to the opportunity that there is now to raise capital in a very different way. This particular webinar, I'm also talking about business resilience with so much going on in the world. Crowdfunding is an amazing tool, not just for funding, but to strengthen your business. So what will we talk about today? What crowdfunding is, how crowdfunding works, the keys to crowdfunding success, how it's different from traditional funding, what you can crowdfund, and how to know if crowdfunding is right for you. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end for Q&A, but as Barbara mentioned, put them in the chat and I'll ask her here and there to let me know if there's a burning question we should cover. So what is crowdfunding? Let's start with a story. I like stories. I'm going to introduce you today to Jorge Garola. He is an entrepreneur from East LA, and he had an idea for a sandal that was inspired by the Anahuac culture. He wanted to celebrate his culture and bring manufacturing to his local community in East LA. He was working with an incubator, and they brought Crowdfund Better, our company, in to work with their entrepreneurs. And Jorge needed capital to buy equipment. So he went through the training, he raised the capital. As you can see, he exceeded his goal. But what he also did was get proof of concept. This was not a product that existed outside of his prototype. He didn't know if it was something that the public would want or support, but he had 64 supporters. And that picture there on the right is a Instagram photo of the equipment he purchased using the funds he raised. And so he is, in fact, taking his business to the next level thanks to crowdfunding. So the technical definition for crowdfunding: a large number of people sharing small amounts of their social, creative, and financial capital via the internet within a limited time window. And I'm going to focus on that last piece, within a limited time window. That's one of the pieces of magic of crowdfunding, is if you give people forever, they'll take forever to support you or to contribute. But crowdfunding puts a very limited window on these actions, and it encourages participation. So how does it work? Well, let's talk about, you need $10,000 for the first milestone of your business. Now, you could find one person who's willing to invest $10,000 in your business, but maybe you don't know someone who has $10,000, or your business isn't appealing to the types of investors who have that capital. Well, what if you have 10 people who could invest $1,000? Or what about pre-selling your $100 product to 100 people? Or maybe you have a community project or a nonprofit, and could you get 1,000 people to contribute $10? It's all still $10,000. All different ways to get to the same point, which is that $10,000 that you needed for that milestone, that first milestone of your business. But it's not just money. It's also about social, creative, and financial support from your community. So what do we mean by social support? Your community, the value of their support is not just money, it's also connections. It's who they know, who they introduce your brand to, they bring customers to you. Creative capital, you may have individuals in your network who want to help you, and they didn't know that you needed help until you put your campaign out there and asked. So it's not just money, it's also all of these non-financial benefits, and we'll talk a little more about that a little later on. And why do I get so excited about crowdfunding? Because prior to crowdfunding existing in the form it does today, really you were limited to these external sources of capital that were outside your community. So big banks, venture capitalists, or institutions, large institutions that were funded perhaps by other institutions. But now with crowdfunding, you can go straight to your community, to a group of individuals. And what that does is level the playing field. Because, for example, 11% of venture capitalists are women, but 50% of the population is women. So instead of only asking 11% of venture capitalists for capital, you can go to 50% of the population. And when you change the funders, you change who gets funded and what gets funded. So here's a story. Women receive only 3% of venture capital funding and only 18% of SBA loans. But women represent 33% of crowdfunding campaigns. More than that, studies have been done, and they say that women are more successful than men at crowdfunding. And that is across all sectors. So you might say, oh, well, that's just in sectors where women are already strong. But it is across all sectors that women are very successful with crowdfunding. But crowdfunding isn't only about getting funding. Crowdfunding is about funding others. And I always want to point this out right at the beginning, because it only works if there are those that are supporting and those that are being supported. So what I like to say is, one of the ways that you can also understand what it is you need to do in order to be successful at crowdfunding is to go out and back others. It's the cheapest consulting you could ask for. When you go to someone else's page and you decide whether or not you will contribute, that's also incredible research about what would make someone want to support your campaign. And when you do that, you get the power to choose what gets made, who makes it, and who benefits. And this is significant because you can think of it as a new financial ballot box. What businesses in your community do you want to see? Especially during this time of COVID, which businesses do you want to see make it, to be there for you? And how could you support them? Or is that your business? And have you ever thought to reach out to your community? Because they may want to say in what gets made and who makes it and who benefits in their community. But how does it work? And The story here is there are different types of crowdfunding, but in general, crowdfunding works the same no matter what type of crowdfunding you use. And to begin talking about that, I wanted to share with you another story. This is Global Wordsmiths, and we were just talking about COVID and how businesses have been impacted by COVID. Global Wordsmiths was affected. They are a translation and interpretation business based in Pittsburgh, and their founder was going to apply for the EIDL and the PPP, and she did, but she didn't want to bank on it, literally. So she went out to her community using an investment crowdfunding platform. And as you can see on the right, these individuals from their community contributed $40,000 to help them continue to provide these vital services during this time. Because that's really what it is. It's your community. Crowdfunding, if you want to look at it differently, is old-fashioned barn raising using new digital tools. In the past, yes, you might have in that, like what was in that picture, everyone in your community would gather together and, raise the barn. But now we're not limited to those that are geographically close to us because of new technology and different ways to gather individuals together online. You have an unlimited audience, potential audience for your product, your service, your social enterprise, your nonprofit. You can reach a lot more people. And because of crowdfunding, you now have a tool to gain their financial support. And my metaphor for crowdfunding is a camera that's standing on a tripod. So what is it that you need to think about as you're putting a crowdfunding campaign together? Well, if you imagine that the camera is focused on your goal, what is it you want your business to accomplish with this funding? And then one leg of that tripod is crowdfunding best practice. And that's why you're here today, is to start to understand how crowdfunding works. What are there certain tools, certain timing, things like that. Then there's your project. Crowdfunding for an established business is going to be different from crowdfunding from a new business. Crowdfunding for a product is going to be different from crowdfunding for a nonprofit. So the other leg of, second leg of that tripod is your project. And then the third leg, the one that people often forget about, is your supporters. Because your campaign has to work for your audience, for your customers, for your community. And if it doesn't work, one of these legs is short and you haven't considered some piece of this, then your tripod is off kilter, your camera's out of focus, and you're not going to be as successful getting to your goal. The elements of crowdfunding are consistent in some ways across all types, and where they are is it's all about story. That's the heart and soul of crowdfunding, is your story. And these days, story is really told very much in video. So crowdfunding campaigns typically have a video. You really want to keep that video to 2 minutes or less so that you can actually get people to watch your whole video. There's often campaign page texts that will also explain what you're trying to accomplish and may go into more detail. Every crowdfunding campaign has a funding goal. And so that is a goal that you set, and depending on whether your what platform you're using, sometimes that goal is what they call all or nothing, meaning in this case, if this campaign didn't reach $19,000, then none of her backers would be charged. And then you could also do a keep what you raise campaign, which is that whatever you raise, even if you don't hit your financial goal, you can use that capital. Really, it's a business decision. If you need $19,000 to accomplish what you've promised to your backers, then you really would want to use that all or nothing. If you have some other capital that you could use, if you don't reach the whole goal or your project isn't dependent on the full amount, then that keep what you raise might be a better fit for you. Every campaign has supporters, and to me, this is actually the most important piece of your crowdfunding campaign, because those supporters are not just people who have contributed money. Those are people who could be your loyal customers. You're going to get the email list of every person who has backed your campaign. And even if they aren't a customer today, you can bring them in and make them a customer tomorrow. These are individuals who will go out and be your brand ambassadors. They're so excited often that they will buy your product before you've created it, or they will support your artistic project before it's even completed. We talked about time frame. Time frame is very important to create that I have to do it now. And then how do you share what you have created with the world? I like to say, you know, there's the phrase, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? And so if you have a crowdfunding campaign page out there and you don't share it and you don't drive traffic to it, it's not going to get the attention that you hope for. So how do you do that? How do you spread the word? You have your team, word of mouth, text, email, all of the social tools. And really, I get asked a lot, which of these is the most powerful tool? And social media is the one that people often will say, oh, social media has got to be the most, you know, that's really got to be the most powerful tool for crowdfunding. And the data is a little different. So email has a 34% higher conversion rate than any other digital tool to crowdfunding contributions. And so even though some people think that email is old, in crowdfunding, email is really important. Now, your highest conversion rate is going to come from the touch that is the most personal. So if you call someone on the phone, if you text them a direct message, it's going to be different than simply posting to a social media account and hoping that that person will see it, which in this day and age, given the algorithms of those platforms, you're not guaranteed that even if you are paying to promote those posts. This next piece is really important, and I was talking about if the tree falls in the woods. The majority of your backers will come from what we call your known network. And by known network, I don't mean like people who you really talk to every single day. They're in there, but individuals that you have a connection to. Now, if you're a business and you have an email list and you have social followers, those are your known network. Your known network can include people in your community that you know because you're parents of children in the same school, or you belong to the same running club, or you volunteer for the same nonprofit. Those are all people in your known network. There's an assumption that crowdfunding platforms bring you the majority of your backers, and it's actually incorrect. The majority of your backers come from you. And the platforms sort of bring the extra. In fact, until you reach 30% of your financial goal, strangers are unlikely to back your campaign, because what they're looking for is, do the people that know you trust you? Do they believe in you? Because if they do, then it's more likely that a stranger can trust you. So I have shared with Barbara and the MCSC a series of worksheets. So there's 4 PDFs that I believe she has either shared with you or will share with you. And they're tools to help you start to really dig in to whether or not crowdfunding is a fit for you, how to think strategically about what you're going to do. And so this first one asks you to think about that network. So this worksheet says, okay, who do you know? Who are the people that you know or the groups that you know? Where are they? How do you communicate with them? And when was the last time you talked to them? And I'm going to focus on the how do you know them and when, and why you want to do this work ahead of launching a campaign. The how is going to tell you which of those channels. Remember, we had that big list from text messages to social media. If your friends and your network don't live on social media, then that may not be where you want to put your first effort. Maybe they are more of a group of people that email. Maybe you have LinkedIn groups. So it's really important to understand where the people are that you want to reach. And then to think about, when was the last time you talked to them? Because I don't know about you, but if you get a communication from someone you haven't spoken to in a couple years, and the first thing you hear from them is, hey, could you give me some money? It's not going to land well. And so you may want to think about warming up those relationships, reestablishing connections, explaining what you're doing without the financial ask before you jump in and put your hand out and say, hey, can you support me financially? So you'll have access to those PDF worksheets. So there's instructions, and then you'll have a sheet like this where you can begin to fill that in and think about it. So I'm going to stop for a second. Barbara, are there any burning questions?
No burning questions. And I did want to say that everybody received that in the 1-hour reminder email. They received all 4 of the handouts. If there's someone who didn't, please put that in the chat box and I'll make sure you get it.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So what makes crowdfunding different from, say, a bank loan or venture capital? It's based on social capital, goodwill, and trust, not collateral or your repayment capacity or your FICO score. What you are doing is you're taking the trust that you have built with people, your character in the community, the social capital you have built online, your company's brand recognition, and all of that goodwill that you can't take to a bank, but you can bring it to crowdfunding and turn it into funding. The equation that you want to think about as you are putting your campaign together is time and money, because crowdfunding does have a cost. It isn't free, but that cost is time. There is a requirement that you invest your time into creating your campaign, into communicating with others about what you're doing, in promoting your campaign. And I hear this question often from people, well, can't I pay someone else to do that? Sure you can, but then you're going to have to pay for their time. So unless you can get volunteers and people who are as passionate as you are, who will volunteer their time, you're going to have to put your time in. And if you want to decrease the amount of time you'll have to spend to put your campaign together, then you will have to invest a little bit of money on the front end to get that support. But the return on that investment is huge. I spoke earlier about financial versus non-financial benefits. So let's just take a look at that. You do get funding, you get growth, you get pre-sales. That's on the financial side. On the non-financial side, what crowdfunding does is strengthen your brand. It provides proof of concept, like with Jorge earlier in the presentation. He learned that he had a good idea and he got market validation. He had 64 people who pre-bought his product before he had even manufactured it. You can test pricing. You can acquire customers. If you have a community project, you can get buy-in from your community that you can prove to grant writing organizations and to people in the community who might want to support you in a larger way. You get brand ambassadors. We have seen research that says that crowdfunding backers are loyal customers. Crowdfunding backers also love to give you feedback, and so you can go to your crowdfunding backers as opposed to, say, putting your product on Amazon. It's like, well, getting feedback, you know, all you're going to get is a review. Yes, no, good, bad. But with crowdfunding, you can have a conversation with your backers and ask them for input. Did you like that? What would you like the next product to be? You can do some research and development. Crowdfunding also helps you develop your digital marketing skills and assets. You're going to learn about PR. Maybe crowdfunding will open up the opportunity for you to partner with other organizations who would not have known about you, except that you went out publicly and talked about what you're doing through crowdfunding. And then I have also seen businesses leverage their crowdfunding success for grants, investors, and loans. So for example, if you're a nonprofit and you're brand new, it's tough to get a grant because you don't have any traction. You can't show what your program has done. But what if you went to your community, raised some capital, you launched a small program, you got that proof of concept, and then you could go back to that grant writing organization and ask for the capital to continue your work. So when we're talking about that non-financial value, here is an example of a campaign that actually crowdfunded not for the money, but for the market validation, for the PR. My client, Matthew Michael, who invented the whisk wiper, he came to me and said, you know what, if I could put this on Amazon, but it'll get lost. So I really want to use crowdfunding to go out and find my audience and to promote my product. And he actually came to me, and then we had a conversation. He didn't launch until a year later because he wanted to really make sure that he understood how he was going to do crowdfunding, who was his audience, how are they going to try to reach him, and how he was going to reach them. Well, as you can see, he was incredibly successful, not just with his financial goal, but you can see all of the press that he got, so that as seen on, and then even a year later, when he won the Women's Day Home and Food Great Value Award for his whisk wiper. More than that, he got the idea for his next product from a campaign backer who looked at his product, which is actually a silicone device that cleans your whisk. And she said, can you make that for a KitchenAid stand mixer? And from that, his next product was born, which he launched a year later from the closing of this campaign to the over 2,000 backers who he had acquired as customers, and had an incredibly highly successful launch of that second product. So I want you to be thinking about the non-financial values of crowdfunding for your business or your idea. So among those worksheets is a non-financial value worksheet where you can sort of look at, is branding important? Is proof of concept important? And what I'd say to you is the more things that you have circled that are closer to 4 or 5, that means the more value crowdfunding could bring to your business beyond the funding. So it'll help you take a measure of that non-financial value. Now, I'm also supposing you want to know, okay, can I crowdfund my business? So to help you with that, let's look at what you can do with crowdfunding. Any stage of business, idea, startup, growth, established. Any size of business, you can be a solo entrepreneur or a Fortune 500 company. And Fortune 500 companies do use crowdfunding to do product testing. You can be any kind of business. I know there are some people who think that crowdfunding is only for product-based businesses. That is not my experience. B2C, B2B, online, bricks and mortar, local, international. Really, it's about bringing your network to your campaign. And if you can do that, you can crowdfund. There are 4 basic buckets or types of crowdfunding. I'm going to walk through those quickly so that you can understand that it's an ecosystem, it's a landscape. And so your job is to look and see right now, well, where do I think I fit in this landscape? So there's donation crowdfunding, and this is for personal needs or causes. I don't recommend that you think of your business as something that would want donations unless you are a nonprofit or maybe you're a social enterprise, getting your start. You provide value, but let's talk about that. Personal causes like GoFundMe campaigns, that's donation crowdfunding. Nonprofits use donation crowdfunding to raise money for their programming. Nonprofit donation crowdfunding can also be used by communities to fund civic projects. So here's an example. The state of Michigan actually has a program to help the community to fund community projects. The next type of crowdfunding I'm going to talk about is crowd lending. So instead of going to a bank to get a loan, you go to your community and you crowdfund a loan. And the most popular platform for this is Kiva. Kiva allows businesses to raise up to $10,000 in crowdfunded loans from their community. They've raised that ceiling to $15,000 during COVID. So for example, the Sweet Root Farm went out to their community and they had 150 community lenders lend them, and it's in increments starting at $25. And they raised the $9,000 to help buy some equipment. And then once they pay that back to their community, then their commitment to those lenders is complete. The type of crowdfunding you've probably heard about is the type of crowdfunding that happens on platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. This is called rewards or perks-based crowdfunding. How does it work? Individuals contribute money in exchange for a reward or perk. It's often a pre-sale or a prepayment. And this is a really interesting type of crowdfunding because it's very helpful with that market testing, with that proof of concept. Because if you, in particular, are an idea stage entrepreneur, or maybe you're an existing business who is trying to determine whether you should launch a new product, rewards crowdfunding gives you a tool to test that market before you invest. For example, you have a product like Jorge. He didn't manufacture a whole bunch of sandals until he knew that he had buyers. And that saved him from investing his capital into something he wasn't sure had a market. So what's popular in rewards crowdfunding? So here are some examples. They've got technology, board games, consumer products, beauty products. And actually, I just saw an article that said during COVID, the 3 top categories are comics, board games, and publishing, which makes a lot of sense. So we're not seeing people step back from supporting campaigns during COVID. We're actually seeing them lean in and want to support people. I also think that more people are online and spending more time online, and so crowdfunding has really seen a lot of support because people are using those digital tools to communicate. Creative projects have been used for, crowdfunding has been used for creative projects since its beginnings. And in fact, that's where crowdfunding really got its start, is supporting artists. So if you are a theater company, you are a visual artist, you are a filmmaker, you are a theater company that's struggling right now because you're not able to open your doors, crowdfunding can provide a way for you to gather your community to support you. There's also ways to get ongoing monthly funding for yourself as a creator. So for example, this campaign on the left, Latinos Who Lunch, this is a podcast, and they're getting financial support from their listeners in order to be able to produce the podcast on a regular schedule. Then there are local community campaigns. And this is where a lot of people don't realize crowdfunding is happening because they see the press talking about the gadgets and the product campaigns. But there's a very active community that wants to support businesses in their community. And the 3 examples I've listed here are 3 different businesses that have launched campaigns during COVID, and as you can see, received pretty overwhelming community support. So for example, Prime Roast by Bike, they were a coffee shop and a bean roasting business, and they had to close their doors. So they got a grant to get a bicycle with a trailer so they could deliver their coffee beans to the community. But the bike only had 1 battery. So they just really needed the capital to buy another battery to back up the battery that they had. And as you can see, the community actually exceeded their goal. They said, okay, well, we'll give you that and a little bit more. So again, it's about, bringing your community to your campaign. If you can do that and you have something of value that your community wants, then you can be successful at crowdfunding. The latest type of crowdfunding to enter the scene is called investment crowdfunding, and it is what it says. All of the other types of crowdfunding, donation, rewards, lending, your backers do not become investors in your company. But with this type of crowdfunding, your backers are investors. And what's interesting is it literally took an act of Congress to make this possible, because the securities regulations, federal securities regulations, did not allow for something that's called general solicitation, which really just means advertising. So you couldn't, as a private company, go out and tell people, I need investors, prior to 2012 with the passing of the Jobs Act and the creation of a number of what they call exemptions, which just mean exceptions to these federal securities laws. So there are 3 or 4 different regulations that were passed, And so there's regulation crowdfunding. This allows you to raise up to $1,070,000 per year. Regulation D, 506C, this is for accredited investors only. And really, that's what used to be, is that only if you were these individuals with a net worth of $1 million or more could you participate in private investment in companies. There's also state regulations. So I've worked with a company that used the California state securities regulations to raise money for their business. So we have these new opportunities to go to people who are just like you and me. So not professional investors, not accredited investors, not just angel investors, but your community, the people who would understand the value of what you do. And really what you're saying is, will you share the risk with me? And then if I do well, you share the reward too. So here are some examples of the types of businesses that have been using that first one, regulation crowdfunding, for raises up to $1,070,000. So we have software, Caribou. It's a Latina entrepreneur who, as you can see, raised quite a bit of capital to expand her business. It's been used for real estate. An example of the Pittsburgh Juice Company. This was a bricks and mortar business that raised money to purchase a delivery truck. And then, I'm in Boise, Idaho, so I'm pretty proud of the Treefort Music Festival, who are currently raising. And they have 530 community investors so far who have contributed over $200,000 to help keep the music festival alive because of COVID. It wasn't able to happen in this year. If we want to look at other stories that are happening right now of businesses that have turned to investment crowdfunding specifically, we have Strong's Cleaners in Pittsburgh. When COVID hit, he wasn't sure how he was going to keep his business open. And what he realized is that if he could clean medical uniforms, then he would have a way to keep his business alive. So he went and raised $25,000. He did it from launch to close in 3 weeks from his community to be able to buy the equipment that he needed to process and clean the medical uniforms for the facilities in his community. The Unbar Cafe, which is based in Cleveland, they worked to launch their campaign, raised over $30,000 from their community in investment, and that allowed them to rehire all of their employees and remain this community space, this place for the community to come and gather, even remotely, and get their coffee and to survive and to move into their next phase. And as you can see, to start food delivery and home delivery. And if that all feels overwhelming, don't worry. In those PDFs that you were sent by Barbara, we have our crowdfunding cheat sheet. And this outlines these different types of crowdfunding, who it might be for, and also examples of platforms that are all reputable. And you can go to their websites and check them out and see what seems to appeal to you. What I would say is your best way of doing the research is go and see if businesses like yours are raising capital on those platforms. And then that's a good indication of whether your business might be successful as well. So Barbara, I'm gonna see if there's any other questions. Take a pause here.
Yes, actually, we have a question. What do you give back, if anything, to your donors?
So depending on what type of crowdfunding you're talking about, so I'm assuming you're talking about donation or rewards. If you're doing nonprofit and you're a 501c3, you can give them a tax deduction. You can do anything that your nonprofit would ordinarily do to thank your donors. Depending on your business, if you're going to do rewards crowdfunding, so I'll give you an example. I've worked with a lot of filmmakers, and so, interesting rewards that you can give that don't cost money. You can, I've had filmmakers, put people in the credits, have people have walk-on roles, to be the first to see the movie. So really, it's as creative as you want to get. Think experiences as well. People really want to be a part of what you're creating, and think about the cost of it. And there's a lot of work to do there if you're going to do rewards, to make sure that you have covered your costs and you've priced your rewards in a way that you'll be able to deliver them. And then if it's on the investment side, you can offer you can offer debt or equity. So that's a little more complicated, and you would work with your legal counsel to figure out what would be the right instrument for your investors.
Okay, thank you. Same person, actually. How do you target your local community?
Well, that's a great question. Your first place you start with is you. You start with who you know, and then think about the concentric circles around you. So who do you know? And then who do they know? And if you have people who you think really believe in what you're doing, then you find those people, we call them champions, the people who will spread the word for you. You can create partnerships with community organizations. You of course can use social media and other digital tools. Really, you want to be thinking and use that worksheet. Is how do you normally communicate? How does your community normally communicate? It could be that the way that people communicate is through your local community paper. So it really depends on your community, and that's why you want to do that work and really think about it beforehand.
Great, thank you. All right, so the questions are coming in now. You've got them thinking.
Ah!
So do you have any examples of crowdfunding for personal development events and services?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about services because it is a tough sell because the person, may or may not, it's not a tangible thing, or it can be a tough sell. And I don't think it's that tough if you get creative. So for example, we worked with a yoga studio, and they wanted to raise money, and they decided what they wanted to do was to raise money to support individuals who were in recovery. So instead of asking people to buy their services, they asked people to buy services so that they could provide them for free to people in the community who would need those services, who couldn't afford them themselves. So that's just the kind of creative thinking that you want to do. And really, it's about surveying the people who would support you and seeing what is it that excites them, what would make them want to take their credit card and put those numbers in and make that contribution.
Great, thank you. So we've had a couple people ask for your information and whether or not you offer consulting services. I know you're going to get to that, so I just wanted to mention that. And then do you know what the limitations are for alcohol-related businesses like distilleries or breweries?
That's a great question. In the rewards space, there are some specific rules around delivering spirits and other things because of federal laws, and there's no way the platforms can get around that. I have seen people find creative ways to raise money that have to do more with their swag than with their alcohol, or by providing people special memberships. On the investment side, breweries, distilleries, food-based businesses do very well there because you're not going to be transporting any kind of alcohol across state lines. You're really taking investors. So that may be an avenue for you to look into because it doesn't have that same complexity.
Okay, thank you. So this question is actually from one of our consultants who has a lot of experience with crowdfunding. And she said she's had clients do crowdfunding and they were surprised by the cost of sales tax for the pre-sale aspect. Can you please speak about that and how and when to build that in?
Excellent. Thank you. I don't know who that is, but thank
That was
you.
Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Yes, and this is what I was talking about when I was saying you really need to, we have a process. We really call it dream. And then the second process is get real. And that's the moment when, you can dream up all the rewards you want, but the next step is to get real and do the research and understand what it will cost. And that does include any taxes that would be due, and shipping costs, packaging costs. So, it sounds great to say, well, I'll offer a t-shirt for $15. But by the end of the whole transaction, you may end up with $1 because the t-shirt had a cost, the packaging had a cost, the shipping had a cost. So, it's very early on in your preparation that you'll want to think about those things. And this gives me such a great opportunity to plug the MCSC, because these individuals are so capable and they're trained to help you think about your business in this way. And it's why we love to partner with them, sit down with an advisor and do the math. So thank you for asking that question.
I have another one. Are you ready for another one?
Go.
Okay. So can much of this be completed through a PayPal link rather than a GoFundMe type page? And how do we report this?
Excellent. So let me just say, first of all, that there is one specific difference between GoFundMe and almost every other campaign. And well, it's GoFundMe and Kiva. They don't give you the email addresses of your backers. So let me just put an asterisk there. I want to say that, which is why I tell you, as a business, please think about using a platform other than GoFundMe. You will not get the email addresses of your backers. So I'll start there. There's something about the storytelling aspect in crowdfunding that brings people to it that a simple PayPal link on your website doesn't. And I could say it's crowdfunding magic, but really it's the story. It's how you do it. And I actually have clients who have crowdfunded on their own website, but they're basically recreating the platform and the way that they tell stories. That's the first piece of that. The second piece is that crowdfunding platforms, it's a very public thing. You have to have someone else sort of say yes to you. And so there is some credibility that those platforms can bring to your campaign if you're a new business. That can be helpful. If you're an established business and you can work out the back end of how to crowdfund on your website, and there even is some plug-in software for WordPress and other website development tools. So go ahead and look into that, but make sure that you follow that format of telling your story and really explaining what the money will be used for. And then once you get the money, so yes, this is revenue to your business or to you. So you want to think about tax implications. So here's another opportunity to talk to MCSC and think about business entity. Do I want to take this money as a sole proprietor? Do I want to create a business entity and separate it from my personal taxes? So it is taxable. And the only sort of like big asterisk here is that you want to think about when you take the money and when you spend it. Because if you collect funds, say for a rewards campaign, and you finish the campaign on December 15th, and you don't spend them in the same year, you may have a tax implication you weren't expecting. So I really appreciate the strategic thinking that I'm hearing go on here. So thank you all for actually asking amazing questions.
Thank you. And actually, one of our consultants was an IRS agent for 18 years, so she could help you with that. So we have another question. Have you seen crowdfunding used by nonprofits to fund capacity building needs, like hiring staff for a specific position to support programs across the board?
The answer is yes, but you cannot sell it that way. No one is going to want to pay for your employee's salary, but they will pay for what hiring that employee does in the community. So think more about how many people can be served, what services can be provided because that employee exists in your organization. So really just think about storytelling and really put yourself in your potential backer's shoes. What would make you feel compelled? Would you feel more compelled by, help me hire another staff member, or help us serve another 100 individuals?
Excellent, great perspective. And one more question, how can you use crowdfunding if you are selling a service, not a product?
It's creativity. So and finding out if your audience will do it. I mean, I have seen people be very creative. It's hard for me to answer. I don't know what your service is, but you have to really find out, will your community contribute? That's really the bottom line of, can a service use this? What's the story you're telling around your service? Why should they want to participate? It's the why.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
All right. Well, this gives us just a few minutes, and this is so great for me to walk you through the, are you ready? Okay, so you've gotten your questions answered. Some of you, probably 100 more questions out there, but here we go. And I want to tell you this, I just created these couple of slides in the last couple of weeks, and I was like, why didn't I start with this? Most people think you create a campaign page and it turns into money. And they do this. They Google crowdfunding, they pick a platform, they create a campaign page, they launch their campaign, and then after they've launched it, they start thinking strategically about how they're going to connect with people and tell them about their campaign. They get discouraged because that doesn't work. Then they seek help, but by then they've lost the momentum, because in crowdfunding, it's all about momentum. So their campaign doesn't fund. And so then they've decided that crowdfunding doesn't work. And I tell you this story because you're going to have people that tell you, oh, I tried crowdfunding and it didn't work for me. Ask them if this is what they did, because this workflow does not work. What works, and this is our process, and you know, it's not like you couldn't have thought of this yourself, but the first thing you do is what you're doing right now. Learn what works. Then you develop a strategy and a roadmap for what you're going to do, including thinking about the tax implications, thinking about pricing, thinking about how you're going to reach out to people. If you have holes in sort of your knowledge base, or you think your network's too small, or you don't know how to reach them, that's your next step. Get training, get help. And here's MCSC. You have a resource where you can get training and get help. Once you have done all of that, then you go into the platform and create your campaign page, and then launch your campaign. And you know, we have 100% success with our clients who actually do this process. So if you do this process, the likelihood of your success is also you know, much higher. And it's also about, you get out what you put in. So if you do the crowdfunding preparation, if you work on your branding, if you work on your messaging, if you build your network, if you think about your website and your email marketing and your social media, you think about influencers and bloggers, your PR outreach, and you develop your team, then all of that non-financial benefit will be what you get out of it in addition to money. And so I ask really 3 questions of people to find out if crowdfunding could be a fit. And it's, are you ready? Are you willing? Will it be of value? So just so you know, one of those PDFs are these questions and this self-assessment. So if you don't get it all, don't worry, you're going to get it, something you can hold in your hand. Are you comfortable with asking people for money? Because if you're not, crowdfunding may not be a good fit for you. And if you're not, do you have a teammate who is, and can that person stand out front? Do you think your current network could support you in raising at least 50%, and in some cases up to 90% of the funds that you need? It depends on sector, but you have to be able to, you have to really think, if I had to do this without any strangers showing up, could I get to 50%? Are you willing? So I was saying, maybe you need to improve some of your skills. Maybe you need to strengthen your network. Are you willing to wait? Instead of launching tomorrow, can you wait 60 to 90 days, which is our typical preparation time with our clients, to launch your campaign so that you can create a day-to-day strategy? And do you have, or do you or your staff have the time or financial resources to strengthen your business capacity, to reach out to your network? Or do you have some funding where you can enlist support in order to, you know, decrease that amount of time that you would have to invest? And finally, this should look very familiar. Is crowdfunding of value? Will it bring you more than money? It is a good deal of work. But if you talk to anyone who has crowdfunded, they will tell you all of these things that they didn't expect that came to their business. The support. I have a business that raised, $100,000 in crowdfunding for their social enterprise. But if you ask them, one of the things that was so important to them is they also had 1,000 volunteers show up to help them build and clean the facility that they were using to launch their business. So it wasn't just the money. 1,000 people and the work of 1,000 people, that was that non-financial value. So as I said, you'll get this PDF with these questions so you can check yes, no, and really if most of them are yes, then I think crowdfunding is something to look at. If the answers are no, then maybe you need to look in a different direction, or maybe it's just not time. My last note, and then I'll put up the slide with my contact information. Become part of the community of givers before you make your ask. Not only is it just good karma, right? If you want people to show up for you, then it's important to show up for them. And some of my most successful clients are people who have been active givers in their community. And when they make their ask, their friends, their family, their wider community, they are so excited because that person has never asked for anything and has been a giver most of their lives. So make sure you put your hand in before you put your hand out. And with that, I will close the presentation. There's my email. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or want to learn more about what Crowdfund Better does. I don't know if we have any time for questions, but I just want to thank Barbara and the MCSC and the California Women's Business Centers for the chance to share this with you.
Thank you. That was excellent. I don't see, oh, here's one more. Oh, the presentation has been really informative, comprehensive. Thank you. And another thank you. Well done. That was really wonderful. And you really showed us the value of crowdfunding beyond just the dollars. So for those of you who would like more in-depth information, I have put or if you'd like some one-on-one consulting, I've put our information and the link to get consulting in the chat box again. And then I wanted to let you know what we have coming up. So we have on November 4th, and let me screen share for you guys so you can see what we have coming. There it is. All right. So on November 4th from 11 to 12, we have the SBA Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Certification. That is a mouthful. And then on the 4th and the 18th, it's a two-part series on social media marketing, and that's in Spanish. So if you want to register for that, we're actually asking you to call Carla, who's going to be doing the class. Her number is 805-215-3194. And then on November 11th, on Wednesday, we have from 10 to 11, Google Drive in Spanish. We had a lot of Spanish ones coming up. And then on the 17th, from 10 to 11, we have another SBA certification, and that's HubZone. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your participation. I hope you got a lot out of it today. If you would like more help, please let us know. Thank you. Have a great day.